It's been so long since I did one of these that I accidentally filmed half of it and then realised I didn't have a brew. So that went well. Hi, welcome, come on in. My name is Aoife and today I am bringing back a book and a brew where I sit down with a cup of tea or coffee and I tell you about 3 books that I have read recently that have a kind of a similar theme or a vibe or it's just something kind of tenuous that will draw them together. Today's theme is that all of these books have orange covers and I felt that that was the appropriate thing for us to do in the lead up to Halloween this weekend. So let's take a look at what the books were. The first book that I read was 8 Perfect Hours by Leah Lewis. This is Leah's 3rd book, but it's the 2nd book of hers that I have read so far. Her previous books are Somewhere Close to Happy and Dear Emmy Blue. Dear Emmy Blue is the one that I read and it absolutely blew me away. Coincidentally, I have also actually talked about Dear Amy Blue in the blue covered version of A Book and a Brew, so you can go and check out what I thought about that one if it's of interest to you. But let's go back to 8 Perfect Hours. So this one focuses on Noelle and Sam, who meet each other in a kind of a motorway pileup during a snowstorm. Noelle is on her way to her parents' house, and Sam is on his way back to the airport so he can get home to the States. While they're both on the way, there is a kind of a snowstorm, a freak snowstorm that has never happened before. Temperatures plummet and the road is blocked for about 8 hours. Noelle is starting to get concerned because her car is quite old, it's a little bit run down. It's kind of a miracle that it's still on the road at the moment actually. So she knows that she doesn't probably have a lot longer to survive in here. Her battery is also starting to die on her phone, so she doesn't really have any option of getting in touch with her family and telling them that she's not going to be on the way. The other car that's beside her is belonging to Sam, and this one is thankfully a little bit more high tech because it's a rental car from the company. He has heated seats, he has air conditioning and heating, and he has a USB port where she can charge her phone for a couple of hours. While she's there doing that, the two of them start to kind of get to know each other, swap stories about their lives, what they're doing, where they're on the way to, just kind of keeping the conversation going. But it turns into a bit of an insta-love situation. Now, insta-love is not one of my favorite things. I don't like that. I much prefer a more slow-burned romance. So then the 8 hours end and everyone is back on their way again. And you think that this will be the last that the two see of each other, but life kind of gets in the way and they serendipitously start turning up at places that the other is. Whether it's at a hospital because Noelle is bringing her mother in for some care, or if it's a restaurant or cafe and Sam is like 2 or 3 people behind her in a queue, they just cannot seem to stop bumping into each other. This book is, of course, primarily a romance, so it does deal quite heavily with the romance, but there are also some much deeper topics that I felt were dealt with really well here. So you have characters who are recovering from a stroke, you have characters who are suffering with issues with their mental health, you have another character who is going through postnatal depression. I felt like all of these were dealt with in such a loving way, and I was really impressed with the outcome. Something, though, that I didn't love about this book is that I felt the 8 hours that are so important they got into the title were over with pretty quickly. I felt like they could have been expanded so much more and we could have known a lot more about Noelle and Sam and their time together than the maybe 3 or 4 chapters maximum that it was dealt with here. I would have loved to see that done a little bit more out. But other than that, I think this would make a fantastic Hallmark Christmas film, and I cannot wait to see what Leah Lewis does next. The next book is an audiobook that I listened to of The Dating Playbook by Farah Roshan. This is the 2nd in the Boyfriend Project series, and I will say that there are 2 things that made this book a little bit difficult for me to read. The first one, as I said, this is the 2nd book in a series, and I haven't read book 1. But I did really enjoy this one, so I'm going to definitely go back and read book 1. And also, I'm really looking forward to book 3. But the second thing that was slightly a bit more of a takeout for me is that it very heavily focuses on American football. I am not very up to date with American football. I am not very well versed in it. So there were quite a lot of references, talking points, things that were mentioned that just completely went over my head for me and I didn't really understand them well enough to enjoy the book that much with those in it. This book focuses on Taylor, who is starting up a new company as a personal trainer and she's having a little bit of trouble finding new clients. She's a little bit down on her luck financially, and she is definitely trying to get the ball rolling a little bit more. Her luck starts to change when she is contacted by Jamar, who is looking to get back into the NFL and he wants to be drafted for the next season. So he hires Taylor as his personal trainer. He gives her quite a lot of money, and he does demand that this is kept all a secret because he doesn't want anybody to interrupt or influence his return to the NFL. To hide the fact that he is training, trying to get back into the NFL, they decide to make the story up that Taylor and Jamal have just started dating. And of course, when you're dealing with a fake dating narrative, real feelings start to come into play. There are quite a lot of steamy scenes in this book, and I will say I felt like they were done so well. I read this book while I was walking around the streets of Berlin, and I kept thinking, if all of these people could hear what was going on in my head, they would be absolutely blown away. I really enjoyed the smut in this book, and anybody who is a fan of kind of steamy scenes in books will definitely really enjoy this one. Some other things that I thought were portrayed really well here is the really strong female friendship between Taylor, Samaya, and London, who also appear in the first book and will also appear in the third book. I really love seeing a group of girls who are just looking out for each other, have each other's best interests at heart, and will lay down their lives for the other two. I absolutely loved seeing that. Something else that I thought was dealt with really well in this book is Jamal has kind of survivor's guilt from an accident that killed one of his best friends back when they were 17. And I know that survivor's guilt is something that quite a lot of people will suffer from, and I felt like that was done so well in this book. Something that I felt maybe needed to be dealt with a little bit more, needed a little bit more time developed to it, was the fact that Taylor had a learning disability or a learning impairment. It kind of pops up now and then in the book, and when it does appear, it's not really dealt with very well. I felt like it could have been expanded on quite a lot. There was quite a lot that could have been brought into the story about that, and that is definitely something that I wish that Farah Roshan had gone into a little bit more. All of that said, though, I did really enjoy this book, and I would absolutely be looking out for the other two in this series. And so the final book that we're going to talk about is Bad Choices by Lucy Vine. I absolutely adore Lucy's work. She is so funny. She's one of the freshest voices in UK women's fiction at the moment, and I was so excited to pick this one up. So here you're following Zoe and Natalie, who meet in the school bathrooms one day when they are both turning 15. They discover that they have the same birthday and decide that that is a cosmic sign that they should be best friends. And they cling onto this for such a long time. They go through so many different changes together. They go through university, relationships, breakups, family issues. And I absolutely loved that the main focus of this book wasn't about romantic relationships, wasn't about finding your perfect partner. It was about platonic relationships. It was about friendships, and it was about how important these friendships are to people in our late 20s and early 30s. It does also deal a little bit with what happens when a friendship goes south for a little bit, what happens when you fall out of touch with your best friend. I really liked how all of that was dealt with across the book. There are quite a lot of characters in here though, and I will say that I did find myself a little bit wondering, who is this person and what is their connection to everybody here? There were times where I just read a name and couldn't put my finger on why I was supposed to know this person. Something that I also loved about this book, and something that I love reading in books anyway, is that there were quite a lot of pop culture references dating from like the late 1990s up until present day. So you've got bands like Blur and the Spice Girls are getting a mention. You've got things like British Bake Off. I love that kind of thing because it really immerses me into the world of where the book is. When the characters are listening to the same music that I did, or watching the same TV shows or movies that I did, it really connects me to what they're doing in life. There are quite a few narratives in this story that involve infidelity. Cheating is not something that I enjoy reading in books, so that is a personal taste thing for me. If it's something that you enjoy reading, just know that there are a couple of them in this book. There are also quite a few difficult topics that are brought up in this book. For example, you have got a character who's dealing with an abortion, and I felt like that was dealt with really well. It was dealt with very subtly, but also with a lot of care. You're also watching a character discover her sexuality and get into a relationship, and then everything that happens when that relationship goes south. That was something that I was experiencing at the time of reading this book, and it really did connect me to what was happening in here. I will also say, of the two main characters, I find myself associating a lot more with Natalie than I did with Zoe, just purely because we had similar outlooks on life. We had some of the similar struggles that we were going through. We were both quite anxious people by nature, so I felt like Natalie was just kind of the person who I had a little bit more in common with. I genuinely really loved this book. I have loved everything so far that Lucy Vine has written, and I cannot wait to see where she is going next. Those are just a couple of books that have orange covers, and I think that you should check them out. Have you read any of those? Have you heard of any of those authors? Would you go and check out any of them? Don't forget to like and subscribe because I have new videos up every week. Now, get on out of here.